I signed the papers with shaking hands, smiling through tears as my parents thanked me. "All this will be ours," Mom said, her eyes glossy with pride. I'd spent 12 years saving every dollar, skipping vacations, taking extra shifts, living small, just so they could finally have a home of their own. I told myself this is what family means. But 2 weeks after moving in, I came by with groceries and saw another car in the driveway. My stepbrother, Ryan, was handing my mother flowers. "Welcome to our house," he said, smirking. My name wasn't on the deed anymore. Mom looked away. Dad muttered, "It's better this way." The world tilted. My savings, my dreams, my trust, gone in one signature I never saw. And that night I decided, if they could rewrite the papers, I'd rewrite the story. If you had asked me 5 years ago what happiness looked like, I would have said my parents standing in front of their own house, holding the keys, smiling like they finally belonged somewhere. That dream was what kept me going through every exhausting double shift, every sleepless night, every weekend spent counting tips instead of resting. 12 years of saving, not for luxury, not for myself, but for them. Mom always said, "We're fine where we are, Elena. We've got a roof, we've got each other." But I could see it in her eyes every time rent went up, every time the landlord made another excuse not to fix something. She wanted a home, a place that was ours. So when I finally had enough saved, nearly $180,000, I decided to surprise them. I drove to their small apartment one Sunday morning, heart pounding, hands clutching a folder of listings. "Mom, Dad, come sit," I said, grinning. "I have something to show you." Dad looked wary, like I was about to confess to a crime. "What is it, honey?" I spread the papers across the table. Photos of houses. Gasped. "Elena, are these?" "Yes," I said. "I think it's time we buy one. Together." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Dad just stared at me. "But how?" "I've been saving. Since college. Every bonus, every tip. It's not much, but it's enough for a down payment." Mom covered her mouth, crying softly. Dad stood, walked around the table, and hugged me so tight it hurt. "My girl," he whispered, voice cracking. "You've done enough for us already." That night we drove around looking at houses. The one we fell in love with was a 2-story home with blue shutters and an old oak tree out front. It needed work, but it had warmth, like it had been waiting for us. Ryan, my stepbrother, tagged along for the final viewing. He wasn't exactly thrilled. "I don't get it," he said, staring at the peeling paint. "You're spending your savings on them? You could buy your own place." I smiled at him. "Because they spent their lives on me." He scoffed. "Suit yourself." A week later I met the realtor. Everything felt like a movie. The papers, the signatures, the pen gliding across the line. The agent smiled. "Congratulations. Once this clears, the house is officially yours." But when I asked if all 3 of us, me, Mom, and Dad, would be listed on the deed, the realtor hesitated. Your parents asked to handle that part separately," he said awkwardly. I frowned. "Separately? Why?" He smiled nervously. "Just said it was a family decision. Nothing to worry about." When I brought it up that night, Mom waved it off. "Oh, honey, don't stress. You know your father and paperwork, we just put it under one name for now. It's temporary." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. After all, they were my parents. The day we moved in, I stood in the empty living room, light streaming through the window, dust dancing in the air like confetti. Mom hugged me from behind. "You gave us a miracle, sweetheart." Dad smiled proudly. "You've changed our lives." Even Ryan cracked a half-hearted smile. "Not bad," he said. "Feels like something real." That night, as we toasted with sparkling cider in paper cups, I felt like my heart could finally rest. I had given them the one thing money couldn't buy, home. But as the realtor's words echoed in my head, they asked to handle that part separately. A faint unease tugged at me. And weeks later, I'd learned just how separate it really was. The first few weeks felt like a dream. Mom finally had her rose garden. Dad spent his evenings fixing up the shed. Even Ryan was around more than usual, helping paint the living room and organize paperwork. Every time I visited after work, they'd greet me warmly, but something felt different. Like they were always whispering when I wasn't around. Still, I told myself not to overthink. Families change when they finally have something good. Maybe that's all it was. One Saturday I brought pizza and wine, excited for our first real family dinner in the new place. But when I pulled into the driveway, a brand new car was parked out front. A silver SUV. Ryan's. He was leaning against it, sunglasses on, grinning like a man who'd just won the lottery. "Nice wheels," I said. "Yeah," he replied. Figured since it's my driveway, I should have something to match. Froze. "Your driveway?" He smirked. "Relax, I'm joking." But when I went inside, Mom and Dad avoided my eyes. At dinner, Ryan kept making little comments about renovations, about how he'd redo the kitchen someday, about his house rules. I laughed it off at first, but when I teased, "You sound like you own the place," Mom snapped her fork down. "Enough, Elena. Don't ruin dinner." I went quiet. Later, when I offered to stay over, she shook her head. "No need. We've got enough people here tonight." I glanced at Ryan, sprawled on the couch, flipping through TV channels like a king in his castle. I drove home in silence, that same uneasy feeling growing heavier. A week later, I stopped by again to drop off some groceries. Ryan met me at the door. "Sorry," he said. "Can't let you in right now. Mom and Dad are out and, well, you know the rules." I frowned. "Rules?" He smiled. "Homeowners' rules." I laughed nervously, thinking it was another one of his jokes. But when I tried to step forward, he blocked the doorway. "Elena," he said quietly. "Seriously, go home." For a second I just stared at him. My stepbrother, the same kid I used to help with homework, now standing like a bouncer at the house I'd paid for. "Fine," I muttered, turning away. But as I reached my car, I saw through the window, on the living room wall, a framed document. The property deed. Ryan's name printed clearly at the top. My breath caught in my throat. I drove home shaking, replaying every word, every warning I'd ignored. The realtor's hesitation. Mom's temporary excuse. Ryan's smug tone. It all made sense now. The house wasn't ours. It was his. And the money that bought it, the savings I'd spent my life building, had become the foundation of my own betrayal. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying the image of the framed deed, Ryan's name glinting in the light. By morning, I drove to the county property office. My hands trembled as I filled out the request form and waited for the clerk to return. She looked at me with polite confusion. "Are you sure this is the right address?" "Yes," I said quickly. "I just want to confirm ownership." She clicked a few keys, then turned the screen toward me. The document showed. Registered owner, Ryan Matthews. Transfer date, April 14th. My name wasn't there. Not even as a cosigner. Could barely breathe. "Can I see who filed it?" Check. "It was submitted by your parents." I thanked her numbly and walked out in a fog. When I got home, I sat in my car for almost an hour, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Finally, I went inside. Mom was in the kitchen, humming while she made tea. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, smiling. "Why is Ryan's name on the deed?" The kettle whistled. Her smile faded. "What are you talking about?" I slammed the folder on the counter. "Don't lie to me, Mom. I saw it. The house is in his name." She sighed, setting down her cup. "Elena, please. It's still our home." "No, it's his home. You gave him everything I worked for." Dad walked in then, rubbing his temples. "Elena, calm down. Calm down. You used my money to buy a house for him." He snapped. "He's family too. He needed stability. You're doing fine on your own." I laughed bitterly. "So being independent means I don't deserve what I earned." Mom's voice softened. "We thought he needed it more. You have a job, a place to live. Ryan doesn't. He doesn't because he's irresponsible." shouted. He gambles, he quits jobs, he. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. We did what was right. I stared at them, my chest tight. Right. You forged my name. Mom froze. What? I pulled out a copy of the file. My signature is on the funding documents. But I never signed it. For a moment no one spoke. Then Dad said quietly, It's done, Elena. Don't make this harder. Tears burned my eyes. You didn't just take my money. You took my faith in you. I left before they could say another word. That night I opened my laptop, staring at my bank history. Every transfer I'd made for the down payment was listed clearly, to Ryan's account. He hadn't just taken my house. He'd taken my trust. Ryan opened the door with a smirk already on his face. Wow, he said. Didn't take long for you to find out. I pushed past him. Why, Ryan? Why would you do this? He laughed. Why not? You make money, they adore you, you're the golden child. I just evened the scales. My hand shook. I helped because I thought we were family. He shrugged. Family's just a word when money's involved. I felt my chest tighten. You tricked them into signing over the deed. No, he said. I convinced them to be fair. Fair. But you stole from me. He leaned against the counter, smug. You'll get over it. You always do. You'll move on, find some new cause to pour yourself into. Not this time, I said quietly. You went too far. He grinned. You really think anyone's gonna believe you? You didn't sign the mortgage, remember? Everything's in my name. I stared at him in disbelief. You planned this. Of course, he said. You're too naive. I knew you'd jump at the chance to play hero. Tears stung my eyes. You made me believe I was doing something good. He leaned closer. You were. For me. That was the moment something in me broke. I walked out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. Outside, I could still hear his laughter echoing. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Saw your brother bragging at the bar, said his sister paid for his house. You okay? It was from a neighbor near my parents' place. I stared at the message, anger boiling into determination. Ryan could gloat all he wanted. But I wasn't done. He might have stolen the house, but I still had the truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. But justice takes proof, and that's what I needed. I called Sophie, an old friend from college who'd become a lawyer. When she answered, I didn't even say hello. I need legal help, I said, voice shaking. We met at a cafe downtown. I told her everything, from the house purchase to the forged documents. She listened quietly, then said, Elena, if your money funded that purchase, you have a case. But we'll need documentation. Bank transfers, messages, any receipts. I pulled out a folder from my bag. Already printed. Sophie smiled. Good. Now about the forgery. We'll need to prove intent. Who handled the paperwork? Ryan, I said. And the realtor? She nodded. We'll start there. Over the next week we gathered everything. My payment records, mortgage statements, text messages between me and my parents about the house. Then Sophie found something that made my blood run cold. The transfer, she said, tapping her screen. The down payment. It wasn't wired into your parents' escrow account. It went directly into Ryan's personal account 2 weeks before the closing. I blinked. What? Why? Because that's how he made it look like he paid for the house. Felt sick. So he used my money to build his lie. Sophie nodded. This is bigger than betrayal. It's fraud. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by files and memories. The photos from moving day, the family smiles that now felt fake. My parents hadn't just taken my money. They'd given it away to someone who saw me as a means to an end. But for the first time since it all began, I wasn't crying. I was planning. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my mother and 1 text that simply said, "Please don't do this. You'll regret it." My chest tightened. Regret. After everything they'd done. I ignored the calls and drove straight to Sophie's office. She was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a folder labeled, Matthew's Family Financials. Got something, she said. I pulled public loan records. Your stepbrother, Ryan, filed for 3 loans last year. All denied. Massive credit debt. History of missed payments. She looked up. He's broke, Elena. He's been broke for years. I sank into the chair. I knew he was careless, but this. Sophie flipped the page. And here's the kicker. 2 months before the house purchase, your parents co-signed a personal loan for him. Guess what they used as collateral? My heart pounded. The house. She nodded grimly. They were desperate to help him. He convinced them that he'd lose everything if he didn't have property in his name. That's why they put the deed under him. I felt the room spin. They risked everything for him, I whispered. Even me. Sophie sighed. They probably thought they were saving their son. But they used your money to do it. It felt like the kind of pain that didn't scream, it just sank deep and cold. My parents hadn't stolen from me out of greed. They'd done it out of guilt and weakness. I remembered all the times Mom made excuses for Ryan. He just needs a break. He's not as strong as you. Be patient with him. And I realized she'd always seen him as fragile. And me as unbreakable. That night I couldn't sleep. The house, the money, the lies. It all circled in my head like vultures. At 2 a.m. I called my mom. She answered on the first ring. Elena, she whispered like she'd been waiting for me. Why? Said. Why would you do this to me? Her voice cracked. You don't understand. Ryan was drowning. He owed people, bad people, money. He said he'd get hurt if he didn't fix it. I pressed a hand to my forehead. So you thought ruining my life was the solution? Please, Elena. We didn't think it through. We just wanted to protect him. Protect him, said my voice breaking. You didn't protect him, Mom. You enabled him. You turned me into his safety net. There was silence. Then softly. You've always had everything figured out. He never did. Her words stung more than I expected. So you punished me for being responsible. She started to cry. I thought we could fix it before you found out. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a whisper. You already did. I hung up and stared at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of grief and fury. By morning, Sophie had already drafted the fraud complaint. But as I was leaving her office, a thought hit me. If Ryan had borrowed money from dangerous people, this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about survival. I needed proof of that debt. And the only place to find it was inside the house I'd bought. That evening I parked down the street, waiting for the lights to go out. When they did, I crept up the path and slipped in through the back door. The house felt unfamiliar, colder, emptier. In Ryan's old office room I found it. A folder marked Accounts. Inside were receipts, IOUs, and a notebook full of names and numbers. Loan sharks, gambling debts, even messages threatening him if he didn't pay up. I snapped pictures of everything. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was solid. When I turned to leave, I heard the front door unlock. Ryan's voice. Who's there? Froze. His footsteps echoed through the hallway, getting closer. I slipped behind the kitchen counter, heart racing. He entered the room, phone light scanning the walls. For a split second, the light flashed across my face. Elena! We stared at each other in silence. He looked exhausted, defeated, but angry. What are you doing here? Held up my phone. Getting my life back. He took a step toward me. You shouldn't have come. Before I could react, he snatched the folder from the counter and bolted for the door. Courtrooms don't sound like movies. There's no dramatic music, no slow claps. Just the echo of shoes on tile, the rustle of papers, and the quiet hum of tension you can almost taste. I sat there, palms sweating, watching Ryan whisper to his lawyer. Mom and Dad sat behind him, eyes down. They couldn't even look at me. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I'd already cried enough. Sophie leaned closer. We have everything we need. The bank transfers, the forgery evidence, and the proof of Ryan's debts. Stay calm. I nodded, even though my heart was pounding like a drum. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The bailiff announced the case. Matthews versus Matthews. Financial fraud and property dispute. Hearing my own last name like that made my chest ache. Ryan's lawyer started first. He painted a perfect picture. That I'd gifted the money, that the deed was transferred voluntarily, that I was now acting out of bitterness. He even had the nerve to call me emotionally unstable. When it was our turn, Sophie stood with quiet confidence. Your Honor, my client spent 12 years saving for her parents. The funds were transferred under the understanding of shared ownership. Instead, the house was registered solely under her stepbrother's name, a man with a history of gambling debts and falsified financial records. She handed the judge the receipts, the screenshots, the recordings. Then she nodded to me. Elena, tell the court why you made those payments. I stood, hands trembling, voice cracking at first. Because I wanted my parents to have a home. I wanted them to feel secure. I never imagined they'd give it all away, especially not to someone who used it for loans and lies. Ryan's lawyer interrupted. Objection. Speculation. The judge waved him off. Overruled. Continue. Took a breath. I didn't just lose money. I lost family. And I want the truth on record. I never signed anything giving him permission to own that house. That's my signature. But it isn't mine. I held up the document. The forged signature, shaky, uneven, stared back at the court like a ghost. The room went quiet. Even Ryan looked uneasy. Then Sophie dropped the final blow. Your Honor, she said. We have a verified audio message from the real estate agent confirming that Mr. and Mrs. Matthews requested the property be titled to Ryan exclusively, stating their daughter didn't need it. The judge's eyes lifted. Play it. The recording filled the courtroom. My mother's voice, nervous but firm. Yes, just put it under Ryan's name. Elena doesn't need property, she's independent. And then my father's voice. It'll be simpler this way. She doesn't even have to know. The words cut deeper than any betrayal ever had. Hearing them say it aloud, she doesn't even have to know, broke something in me that I'd been trying to hold together for months. When the recording ended, the silence was unbearable. The judge leaned forward. This court will reconvene after reviewing the evidence. Until then, property rights are frozen. Mr. Matthews, you are not to sell, lease, or mortgage the home. Ryan's jaw tightened. Mom started to cry quietly. Dad rubbed her back, avoiding my eyes. As court adjourned, I turned to leave, but Ryan called after me. You think you've won, he hissed. You're tearing this family apart. I turned slowly, meeting his glare. No, Ryan. You tore it apart the day you cashed my life into your name. For a moment, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But then he smirked, that same smug, cruel smirk. We'll see what's left of your family when this is over. Sophie guided me out of the courtroom, whispering, Don't let him see you break. Outside, the world felt both brighter and heavier. I'd finally exposed the truth, but it had cost me something I could never get back. My parents' trust. Or maybe, my illusion of it. That night, I sat in my car outside their house. The lights were on, silhouettes moving behind the curtains. I thought about knocking, about demanding an apology. But I didn't, because some doors once closed should stay that way. The hearing made headlines the next morning. Local news called it the family house fraud case. Ryan's face was everywhere. His smirk frozen in photographs that now looked hollow. Sophie called me early. It's starting, she said. His lenders are pulling out. They've realized the house isn't his to use as collateral. I opened my phone and saw messages flooding in. Friends, co-workers, even distant relatives asking if it was true. It was. Every lie he built was crumbling in daylight. By noon, the bank froze Ryan's accounts. By evening, the loan sharks came knocking, literally. He showed up at my workplace, wild-eyed, sweating. "You have to fix this," he said, grabbing my arm. "They're going to come after me." Pulled away. "You mean the people you borrowed from using my house?" His voice broke. "Elena, please. I'll lose everything." I stared at him for a long moment. The same brother who once laughed at me, who forged my name, who watched me cry and felt nothing, now begging for help. For a second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I said softly, "You already did." He collapsed to his knees in the parking lot as security pulled him away. That night, I sat in my apartment staring out the window. The rain fell hard, washing the streets clean, or maybe just pretending to. For the first time I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. Sophie called again. "You know," she said, "you could press criminal charges. Make sure he never touches another dollar in your name again." I took a long breath. "We'll finish the case. But I don't need revenge, Sophie. I just want my peace back." She smiled. "Then you've already won." As I hung up, I realized she was right. Ryan's empire of deceit had collapsed, but mine, the one built from patience, love, and endurance, was still standing. The final hearing was quiet. Too quiet. No cameras this time, no reporters. Just me, Ryan, our parents, and the truth laid bare. Ryan looked worn down. His once perfect hair was messy. His suit wrinkled. Mom's eyes were red. Dad stared at the floor like the answers were hidden in the tiles. The judge reviewed everything, the forged documents, the bank transfers, the recorded calls, even the threats. When he spoke, his voice was steady, final. "The court recognizes that Ms. Elena Carter's funds were used to purchase the property in question. The ownership is hereby restored to her. Mr. Ryan Matthews is to vacate the premises within 10 days. The words hit the room like thunder. Ryan buried his face in his hands. Gasped. "Your Honor, please, he's our son." The judge didn't even look up. "And he committed fraud." I wanted to feel victorious, but instead I just felt tired. Outside the wind was cold. Mom came after me, trembling. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she said. I turned to her. "You meant every choice. You just didn't expect the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears. "He's still your brother." I took a deep breath. "Then maybe you should remind him what that word means." Dad tried to speak but stopped when I looked at him. For once he seemed smaller, a man weighed down by the truth. As I walked away, Sophie smiled faintly. "It's over." But I knew it wasn't. The legal battle was done, but the emotional one had only begun. That night I drove to the house alone. The lights were off. My reflection stared back in the window. Tired, scarred, but finally free. A week later, the house was mine again. Legally, completely, and silently. Ryan had moved out without a word. My parents hadn't called since the verdict. Then one morning an envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter. "Elena, we know we hurt you in ways we can never undo. We thought we were saving Ryan, but we were losing you. The house was never meant to divide us. It became a mirror of everything broken. We're sorry. If you ever want to start over, the door is open. Love. Mom." I read it 3 times. My anger didn't vanish, but something inside me loosened. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about letting them back in. Maybe it was about letting myself move forward. That evening I drove to the lake near the house. The sunset turned the water gold, just like the dreams I once had when I started saving for them. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I did it, Mom. I gave you a home. Even if it's not the one we imagined." Then I smiled, because I finally understood. Home wasn't 4 walls or a deed. It was peace, and I had built mine from truth. As I drove away, the last light of the sun hit the house's windows, glowing like forgiveness itself. Sometimes the people you love will mistake your kindness for weakness, until you remind them how strong you really are. If you've ever been betrayed by family, remember, peace is the greatest inheritance. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories where truth finds its home.